Okay, now, from the beginning.
Check this out.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to We Built This Part 2, everybody. I am Orlando Bailey, the host of Urban Consulate Detroit, and I am coming at you live from the Cochran House here in Brush Park, right next to downtown Detroit. I'm so happy that you have joined us once again for Part 2 of We Built This. We have a tremendous treat in store for you tonight once again. Yeah, get a load of this view, y'all. I told you last night that I will be broadcasting from different places in the Cochran House, and so this is a different view from last night. Y'all see that spiral staircase? Check out the cochranhouse.com. The next time you're in Detroit, it's a luxury bed and breakfast. You will not be disappointed in the hospitality. Y'all see, I'm drinking from my Cochran House mug, and it's good. I also want to make sure that I acknowledge and shout out the New Economy Initiative for making all of this possible, especially the Detroit Innovation Fellowship. We will be featuring at least two, we'll be featuring two fellows tonight from Cohort 1 and Cohort 2. And I want to shout out Bridge Detroit is our media partner. So you will be able to watch this content again on bridgedetroit.com. So go to bridgedetroit.com to subscribe for free today. Listen, we have tremendous talent coming on tonight to talk about some of the things that they are building. We will be talking to Passion Murray first, talking about growing a movement under the guise of We Built This. And then a little later on, we'll be talking to James Johnson Pyatt, Chase Cantrell, and Taya Ali, talking about building for tomorrow. Those are some developers actually building spaces in Detroit and New York and Philly. So I am excited about that. But first up is Passion Murray. But before we talk to her, I want you to watch this little video. Take a look.
Experts have shown that it takes anywhere between 500 years and 1,000 years to develop 1 inch of soil.
That's what it usually looks like at 6 months old, you know what I mean?
And we as people depend on the soil, so we have to be very careful in how we manage the soils. According to the Food and Agriculture of the United Nations, we had 60 years of soils, or 60 years of harvest left globally. During different eras throughout history, we were careless as human beings. Urbanization, one, the impact of cars, manufacturing in the industrial eras, a lot of the practices of farmers, we are contaminating the soils. If we're going to exist as a human race, it's our responsibility to sustain those things. As a human being, it's important for me to grow my food in the most natural state, because those nutrients and everything that's coming out of the ground is essentially in my body. I'm a part of that soil. The next generation and generations to come, they have to be able to get their food. They have to be able to build on the soil and rely on it. In 60 years, my hope is that they won't have to worry about where their food is coming from, or if the soils are so contaminated, could they depend on it? We have to adapt policies. We have to start composting. We have to start managing soil properly. We have to look at year 61 and year 62 today.
All right, I am excited to welcome Passion Murray of Detroit Dirt for this one-on-one. Hey, Passion.
Hi, Orlando.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well. I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this one-on-one with you.
Happy to be here.
I must say that I am a big fan of yours. Followed you for a while. I seen your TED talk and, you know, all of that. And, you know, you are an amazing storyteller, and you resonate with so many people, myself included. I want to start this conversation by, you know, just sort of having you ground us in the value of dirt, right? You talk about the name of the company is Detroit Dirt. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting name. Can you talk about that for us?
Yeah, so the co-founder, we're no longer partners anymore, but when there was a group of us talking about what we should name the company, Detroit Dirt for me was so symbolic. It was just, it resonated with me. And so, you know, the difference is I get in trouble sometimes with scientists because they're like, dirt is dust and mud and it's dead. The soil is healthy and alive, you know, but for the most part, Detroit, the portrayal of the city of Detroit in the media and the press, it was about, blight, porn, destruction during the economic downturn. And I just thought it was a great play on words. Sure, compost is living. There's organisms in there. Sure, soil, when it's healthy, it's alive. But Detroit dirt just fit well. It was symbolic, and it represented something beyond composting. It was really about representing the people, the city, and making a name, a brand.
Yeah, talk a little bit about the narrative that was being pumped out into the world about Detroit when you got started, and how Detroit dirt really was a counter to take back some of that narrative.
Sure. As I began to travel, and especially when the urban farming movement began to evolve again, because it works in cycles, I didn't want people I wanted them to actually hear about the greatness of the city, all of the musicians, everybody that contributed to the moral fabric, the foundation of Detroit in itself, the car, the interstates, all of the architects, the lawyers, the doctors. I was representing not just myself, but a standard. And I think that Detroit was, at one point, it was known as the car capital, but at some point throughout history, the negative misconceptions about the city, it was out there. So when I walked into a room, I was there to represent the city in a way where if I left or something were to happen to me that next day, they would remember the positive vibes and the positive energy that I had to bring, because the city was doing so many positive things that people weren't aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, so, what's interesting is we hear a lot about climate equity and climate justice and urban agriculture, and it's not really, we don't really see that personified in the person of a Black woman or a Black person, period. Black person, period. Why?
Here I am.
Here you are, right? But why should this movement matter why should the movement toward environmental justice and climate equity matter to Black people? And how do you have that conversation?
Well, first of all, if we look at the African diaspora, if we look at who we are as people in the South, let's just use the United States as an example. Our ancestors are in the soil. I mean, they cultivated the land.
I love that. I love that.
Our blood is in the soil. We are the soil. We're a part of it. All of our ancestors are. But I think during slavery, there were so many negative things that happened. And as we began to migrate, we wanted to disconnect from agriculture at that moment, not spiritually. Spiritually, we will always be connected. But for me, as a Black woman, it's important to represent this space in the best way possible, because there are a lot of us out here. People just don't know the names of the Black woman in South Africa, or the woman in London, or the woman in LA. They just don't know who she is yet, but we're out here. And there's some who are known, but it's very important that we start to understand our role. You cannot have climate justice or environmental justice without Black people, Latinos, or people of color sitting at the table making decisions on policy, locally, federally, whatever. We have to be a part of, we can't just sit at the table. We have to be a part of the economic inclusion and the development. Infrastructure calls all of us. You can't, Mother Nature, when something is destroyed or a crisis happens, it's not, oh, wait, the storm is going to go around and go, to just the poor people. It's going to impact all of us. You can't have a viable or progressive world that is moving forward without, people of color. You just can't, that's impossible.
And we have to pay, special attention to it. I worked in a previous life on social determinants of health in the city of Detroit, and some environmental policies, especially on part of corporations, disproportionately affect communities of color, like the Marathon Oil Plant in Southwest Detroit. We know Southwest Detroit is primarily Latinx, as well as, high rates of asthma and type 2 diabetes in the 48213 zip code on the east side. And so how important is framing these kinds of issues to get us on board with paying attention to this and advocating for ourselves, because it literally means our life?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So for me, it depends on the audience. The overall message is we are connected to the soil. We are what we eat. Our health is dependent on that. The toxins and the pollution, it's impacting our lives. If you live next to an incinerator or an oil refinery or a landfill, that water, that land is being impacted. At the end of the day, when I talk to students, the vision that when I walk into a room and they're like, oh, I want to practice law. Oh, I want to be a biologist, or can I do both? And I'm like, absolutely. It's about interdisciplinary careers that are going to play a role within the climate resilient movement. Resilience is about us being visionaries and looking at the projections and the forecast for the future and creating the solutions around it. So people of color, we definitely have to come to the forefront and make sure that we're helping to make decisions, because our lives are dependent on it. We are the ones who are impacted. The indigenous, whether we're talking about Africa, Brazil, or even people in urban settings here in the United States, or whether you're in South Africa or the slums of India, you are the ones who are being impacted. We are migrating around the world. The migrations are happening. People are moving because of storms, because of climate change. And now's the time for us to really start looking at infrastructure, changing the laws, changing the policies, because we have to be prepared for future generations. It's not fair, to these young people of the world. If they can't live a fulfilled life, that's not fair. We have to start preparing now. We should have been preparing 30, 40 years ago, right? Yeah. But now it's about economics. We can now show the value of economics that aligns with, climate resiliency.
I really appreciate that. One of the things that you said that, is pretty profound to me is that, those Black folks that migrated to the North during the Great Migration, was sort of disconnected from the soil in a way. We were able to get jobs and pay for our kids to go to college and have homes and 2-car households. Talk about the trauma that was associated with us in the soil. It's our essence, it's part of us, but we went through some stuff, which is why we wanted to disconnect, right?
Right. I mean, if you were running from racism or Jim Crow, slavery, what have you, whatever era that was, you were looking for opportunity. I just think that because agriculture was associated with negative things in our lives at the time, a lot of Black people, we went through so much with the struggle and, socially, just our lives in general. We wanted to get away from all of that trauma that happened to us, but we were heading for opportunity. We were looking for opportunity. And I think when you look at the Homestead Act, you look at different things that happened throughout history, we couldn't focus in on possessing land because we were fighting for our lives and fighting for our rights. So how were we able to, focus on agriculture? Now, some of our families still own land down there. My family still has land in the South. Other families still have land in the South. But if you're fighting for your life, agriculture, wasn't necessarily going to be at the top as a top priority. You were looking for a job, you were looking for freedom and liberty. But I think now there's a generation of people who are coming full circle. And then the Black farmers throughout history, they've kept that legacy. But it's time for more of us to join that fight and join those efforts. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's worth noting, right? You know, coming from a system that was extremely violent and volatile during slavery, and then into a system of sharecropping where you're still sort of essentially working for free. I can understand the disconnect, but we can't really disconnect because it's part of our essence. I really appreciate you bringing that out. And you mentioned policy, right? You mentioned sort of cementing some of these justice practices in policy. How do we go about doing that? Like, where do we even start?
Yeah, so I think there's a multitude, a diverse, a huge spectrum of options that we have, but we can start with the schools with teaching this as a curriculum, getting young people to truly understand what their role is and what kind of careers, you know, environmental law and, you know, biology, they can write policies one day. But I think on the local level, when it comes to policy, we just have to continue to fight as urban communities around the country, around the world. We have to look at existing systems and examples that are out there. Obviously, we have to invest billions of dollars in infrastructure. But when it comes to policy, I think it's really going to come down to the private sector and the public and the municipality stepping up and aligning with the UN Sustainability Development Goals, looking at how many dollars or what we have to allocate to implement you know, this infrastructure, because it's going to take a huge amount of investment for infrastructure. But I think around policy, those of us who are actually boots on the ground, who are working at this constantly every day, we have to come together. We can't have, you know, a united front where there's different silos working all over the world. We have to come together. And I think the UN, I think the United Nations has done a good job at categorizing these goals over the next 10 years around water, you know, soil, around humanity in general. You know, they've broken down the ecosystem and really giving us some goals that we can align with for the next 10 years. I think policy, you know, on a local level, you know, and a federal level, we're just going to have to start pushing for change. And a lot of these private corporations, I think they're doing a great job now because their corporate and social responsibility sustainability has become, you know, a top priority for some of these corporations. And I think that the more we talk about economics and show the value, and I'll give a quick example, the waste stream in itself. When you look at, if we're wasting, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars to landfills or incinerators, and we're not managing food systems properly, if we began to dismantle those antiquated systems and we start managing our food systems where we're not throwing away that food waste and we're managing it and getting it to the people who need it because they need to be fed, you know, there's some, you know, environmental justice that needs to happen as well, you know, that, but at the end of the day, when you look at something as simple as the waste stream, we can actually put a value or a dollar value on the waste stream now, where if we recover certain materials, we can make byproducts. So we're talking about a whole nother market here. This is about creating markets. This is about byproducts. This is about economics. So policy and economics, they're one and the same with this. This is not about, you know, this particular movement around climate. We have to involve everybody. We need all experts coming to the table, not just scientists, but we need people who understand economics and who understand market.
I'm glad you brought up economics, because that was going to be my next question. For a lot of Black Northerners, working with soil, working with dirt, working with water, for a lot of us, it is a new economy, right? And we don't always know how to plug into the new economy's right away. How can we economically benefit from this movement?
Sure. I think the small business, I think we as entrepreneurs, I'm an advocate, but I'm an entrepreneur at the end of the day. I think we need to start looking at how to redirect and reinvent ourselves within whatever industry we're in. It was the automotive community that gave me the opportunity, or at least opened up the door for me to build a platform. And I can use the waste stream again. It started off with maybe 50 companies that I was aware of who were creating off of the waste stream, right? They were making byproducts for the car or working in various industries. Now there's hundreds of people who are recycling oil, steel, plastics, you name it. So I think if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, you know, or you're in a position within a corporation, you have to look at how is your company going to benefit from that. Some corporations have a sustainability coordinator, some don't have any at all, some have departments. What we're seeing is an evolution, right? We're seeing corporations today who are saying, okay, what can we do? Well, the bottom line is, whether you're an individual or you're a corporation, now the decisions that you make, your 10, 12, 13-year projections, your forecast should involve the climate space and sustainability, no matter who you are. Whether you're investing in companies who are offsetting that carbon or whether you're offsetting the carbon, you have to invest in that. It's not about, oh, they, them. Okay, if you're an automotive company, let's use the automotive companies for an example. They are investing in electric vehicles now, in the companies that have been working on this, like Rivian. That's great. Ford may have not been doing that themselves, but they found a company that was doing that. If you're Tyson, if you're Gordon Foods, if you're a food distributor, find the local composters or those who have the technology to help you offset that carbon. You can align with the companies who are actually doing the work. If you're an urban farmer, think about regenerative practices. It's not just growing the food, it's using the resources, it's recycling, it's replenishing the earth. If we keep taking from Mother Nature and not investing in her, we're already at a deficit right now. We're working against the clock. So everybody has to start thinking about me. If I'm an accountant, you know what I mean? If I run a law firm, whoever you are, you can find your position within this climate fight, because now once we start creating the economic value in the investment, we can now see ourselves and what our roles can be in this. And as an individual, I just encourage research. I'm researching all the time. We all have to research and understand, just like when you're building a business plan and you know your competitive analysis, your marketing analysis, you need to do that for your life. You need to audit yourself. You have to audit your life. You have to audit yourself.
You gotta audit yourself. I love that. Oh man, especially you know, because you know, for Black folks, our pathways are not super linear. You know what I mean? They're jazzy, they're zigzag. I think you used the term non-traditional, right? And so yeah, like get into it. I want to switch gears for a minute. I want to talk about just how prevalent you are and how great you are at getting your story out there, right? We've seen you in TED, Ford, we've seen you on national stages, we've seen you on college campuses and all of that. You are and have managed to make sure that the story of Detroit Dirt is out there. So my my question is, can you clarify the difference between great storytelling and media support and having actual support, monetary support, physical support? Because I think we may conflate the two.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that, because the Ford ad has done wonders for me, but it's also been a bit detrimental at the same time, because people saw Passion Murray in the media. They saw me speaking in other countries, and on campuses and going on tour. But telling the story, you know, I love the fact that Newsweek told, you know, named me one of 13 disruptive women. I love the fact that Entrepreneurs Magazine and Fortune and Forbes, all of these people were able to, they allowed me to share my platform. But the problem is the storytelling, it's beautiful. I love it. But at the same time, small businesses, we need to be able to scale. We need funding. We need help. We need assistance. The story is one thing, and the media has actually been my friend up until now. You know what I mean? I can't complain about the media. But from a financial standpoint, as far as funding, I had to be like a lot of Black people or Black women. We have a non-traditional way of getting support. You know, we have social capital and, you know, social equity where we're fighting, you know, every day. We don't necessarily walk into a bank and get $1 million to fund the business. We have to find the corporations and the people around the world who are like-minded, who would want to support us. But I'm still building, and you know, I have a couple of great business plans. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I'm just not a traditional business. I'm a consultant. You know, I wear a consultant hat. I have a company that focuses on waste diversion, and I have a nonprofit that focuses on awareness and education. You have to be creative and, you know, every day figure out, you know, what your plan or execution is. I wake up every day thinking about that, but I'm just not a traditional person. My model's not traditional, and you have to convince people of the value. You know, I have to show them, listen, we can haul food waste like waste companies haul, you know, waste. Even though food is not waste, you can make a byproduct with it. So you have to show, you know, the value of the model so people can truly understand that, you know?
Yeah, I do understand it. I'm interested in actually someone is asking, I find that dirt is valuable. Does Detroit Dirt sell dirt?
Absolutely. Listen, DetroitDirt.org. We sure do.
DetroitDirt.org. Make sure you visit. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about this pandemic and how it has affected your work, if at all. How has COVID-19 changed the way that you do your work?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked that question, because everyone was talking about pivoting and reimagining, and you know, COVID, unfortunately, we lost a lot of lives, but as business owners, we did get a chance to take a step back and reassess and think about how we wanted to reemerge, whatever normalcy is in the future. But for me, you know, personally and business-wise, I started aligning with more organizations who are reaching out and saying, okay, Passion, what are we gonna do? What should we do? And COVID really pulled back this layer and began to reveal the inefficiencies of the world within certain systems, like food system, manufacturing. We really took a look at our economy in the United States and said, wait a minute, we've been doing a few things wrong here. You know what I mean? We need to redirect. And so I may not be composting on a day-to-day like I was, but the opportunities to consult and to get corporations to start looking at how they can align with the UN Sustainability Development Goals, that has done wonders. I've been working with organizations to talk about the countdown over the next 10 years. What do we need to do locally and federally? What components of the economy, right? How do we all work together, you know, for the greater good of our country? So it impacted the composting aspect of my life and what Detroit does on a day-to-day. But it's inspired me to think about how to align with others, right? I was speaking about that earlier, where there are a lot of corporations now who want to invest in socially impactful businesses. I didn't have a lot of the conversations I've been having over the last 2 or 3 months. No one was really reaching out and saying, how can we help you? Not that most of them have done that yet, but at least they're having the conversation. And that's what's important. But we climate, advocates, entrepreneurs, we were already in crisis management mode. I mean, we were already, like, I wake up every day thinking about how are we going to impact the world. So COVID it amplified it. You know what I mean? It really gave me something to think about, and it gave me an opportunity to really truly start talking about economics and how, within the climate space, there's an opportunity for a new market, right? Companies, the S&P 500, they help people build portfolios. Well, now the social and environmental governance, now we're building portfolios around climate. So, we just kind of accelerated the movement, if you will. And we were able to
That's amazing. Yeah.
We were able to see the impacts. When everybody retreated and said, oh, we need to practice social distancing, Mother Earth reacted to that.
Yeah. In a very real way. Passion Murray, changing the way that we think about waste and the way that we think about dirt, and challenging us to become a part of the movement for environmental sustainability and justice and climate equity and justice. My last question before we wrap it up is, how can we, our audience, people like me, support Detroit Dirt?
Well, you can always write a check, you know what I mean?
That's right. You won't get it unless you ask. You won't get it unless you ask.
No, I would love to work more with the nonprofits and local funders. I've spent time over the last 12, 13 years, being from Grand Rapids is where it started and educated me on sustainability and green building. That's where it all began. But currently today, I would love it if I could get more, I'm positioning myself to align locally now. Globally, it's happening, but I would love to align and get more support, because I didn't share, I should have had it in the background, but we have a rendering that Giffords Webster, a concept that we have, that we want to build this this property out in Southwest Detroit, and we really want to expand and scale and begin to recycle resources here in the city. So we need funding, we need support.
Right. You hear it, write the check. Passion, can we come and see you? Like, is there a physical location that we can come and check out when it's safe?
Yeah, so over the years, we were in Southwest on Michigan, right on the border of Corktown. We were over there off of Michigan Avenue and 22nd. We're not open to the public currently. And then the packaging for the actual composting was we have a space at Goodwill Greenworks off of Lynch Road. So we're hoping over the next year that we'll raise enough funds so we can build out the space, in Southwest. That's the ultimate goal, is to have an example of this model right here in the city. We need to replace landfills. We need to replace incinerators. We have the solutions. Come see me, whoever you are out there. Let's do it.
Passion Murray from Detroit Dirt, it is such an honor and a privilege to connect with you. Thank you for being an amazing human, and keep up the amazing work. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Orlando. Thank you so much.
No problem. It's a pleasure. Listen, coming up next, we are talking about building for tomorrow. So we will be talking to real live developers in Detroit and Philly and Brooklyn. And I'm so excited to welcome these three amazing humans to Urban Consulate. But right after you watch this video, again, I'm broadcasting live from the Cochran House in Brush Park. Visit thecochranhouse.com the next time you're in Detroit. It's a magnificent place to stay. But until then, Watch this video. We'll be right back.
A lot of dynamic people in the room. You all have all met me, so I'm Chase, for those who may not remember. And I'm the director of an organization called Building Community Value, which runs this project, Better Buildings, Better Blocks. September 2008 was when I started my practice. Very weird time to start practicing law as a young professional. But what I found is in about 2010, 2011, things began to rapidly change. So the client base of my firm, which at the time, Zakima Gossett, didn't necessarily reflect the population of the city of Detroit. So being a Detroiter and not seeing a lot of development in the neighborhoods where I'm from and where my family is from, I decided to step away from the practice of law to try to start an organization that can teach Detroiters about real estate development, as well as actually do development in the neighborhoods.
Course goal: provide Detroit residents with the tools to execute small and medium-scale developments in the neighborhoods throughout the city, thereby giving everyone a chance to participate in the economic benefit of the resurgence of Detroit.
Hello everyone, I'm Darren Vaughn. I was here for the cohort last year and really learned a lot in here. It really opened me up to the way that I thought about property development.
Last year in my real estate class that really kicked my butt, Deidre came and you spoke to our class and you talked about you having this type of program, and I knew then that I definitely needed to take this course because I just found out this is like a whole other language, another way of talking that I didn't understand, and I wanted to get a refresher course there.
I'm not here for more so of being like the next developer on Forbes list, but maybe how can I get the community to see value in themselves? Because Detroit has like a long history which has created this housing crisis.
So I'm very grateful for this class. I'm going to learn so much, and I'm going to do some development.
All right, I am excited. Everybody, please help me welcome Chase Cantrell from Building Community Value, whose video you just saw, James Johnson Pyatt from Urban Development, working in Philly and in New York City, and Tanya Ali from 18th Street Design Build Hub. Thank y'all for joining me.
It's good to be here, Orlando.
Yeah, hey y'all, good to see y'all. I love the backgrounds. I love the background. So we didn't do long and laborious introductions because we want to get right to it. But because you guys are actually developing spaces, I want to hear and I want you to tell the folks about the spaces that you are developing. Since Chase, we saw a video of what you do. How about you go first?
All right, happy to go first. So the video that you all saw was of the nonprofit that I run, Building Community Value. And you saw Orlando featured in the video, which was great. But the project behind me, this is 7400 West McNichols. So this is on the west side of Detroit. As you can tell, this is a rendering. This is not quite what it looks like yet, but this is what it will look like once it's done. And it's great. Right now it's terrible. The roof is caving in, there's water damage on the inside. We're tearing out all the interior walls. And we're bringing in 2 restaurants, bringing in a brewery from Ypsilanti, a Black-owned brewery. We have an entertainment venue that's going to be in the space, as well as retail. So we're taking something that's been vacant for over 10 years, and we're turning it into a neighborhood community. And a lot of that's been based off of what community members have said that they've wanted over the years. So we're trying to give neighbors what they say they want. And I live right up the street, so I can't wait to walk to the space in my own neighborhood. So I'm really excited about it.
Thanks for sharing, Chase. Tanya, can you talk to us about the 18th Street Design Build Hub?
Yeah, so 18th Street Design Build Hub is located right on the verge of, it's in the Upper Richard community. It's approximately 4 blocks from the train station. And we were looking for a permanent place for our AGI construction office, along with trying to figure out how can we stay rooted within our own community in Southwest Detroit. And so it's a historic Queen Anne home that's about 100 years old. And we started engaging with the residents about a year and a half ago with just asking them a lot of questions, a lot of different interactive with them, door to door, working with youth, asking them how they felt about a small business moving into that property. We were from the community, but we wanted to also demonstrate what that model would look like if a for-profit business would actually engage and talk to the residents about moving into the center of the neighborhood, which was really important for us because we truly want to hire and build from centers of our own communities. It's really key for us to grow along with building up the people around us. We're excited.
Building brick and mortar and building people. I want to come back to that. That's really good, Tanya. I want to get to James Johnson Pike. James, you're doing a whole lot, but what you want to tell us about tonight?
All right, well, we're going to focus on our Flatbush project. So good to see everybody. So behind me is the rendering for a mixed-use project we're doing in Brooklyn. So Flatbush is a predominantly Caribbean community. And the focus here has been really preserving the culture and the commerce and conviviality of the Caribbean sort of diaspora in Brooklyn. So 20 years ago, a single story vendor market was built. The city ran it. The city wanted more affordable housing on the site. So 7 years ago, we joint ventured with another developer, and we basically spent the next 7 years going this saga, trying to preserve the market space. The whole mantra has been development without displacement. So trying to preserve the businesses in the marketplace while at the same time having to acknowledge the neighborhood is shifting. And so, thinking of our building really as a bulwark against, some of those gentrification pressures, but then also the unintended consequences of our building potentially driving gentrification to some extent as well. And I think what's really interesting about our project now is, can we preserve the natural sort of community anchor opportunity that a market like that tends to be, especially in the age of COVID, when we can't touch each other, we can't necessarily be around each other, and our whole premise has been focused on kind of bringing folks in and give them a taste of the Caribbean. So it's it's going to be a work in progress over the next year and a half, but we're pretty close. I'll flip it super quick for y'all can see. So construction-wise, we're far along, right? So it's coming along pretty well, but we got a good last mile to go.
Yeah, it looks amazing though. It looks like it's gonna. I can't wait to celebrate with you once it's built. All three of you sort of talked a little bit about the community engagement aspect around development, and I can definitely speak for Detroit, and it may be the same for Philly and New York City, that a lot of development is scary and is seen as encroaching upon culture and driving up neighborhood values, in some cases, gentrification. So we sort of look at development with a side eye, and trying to figure out if it's really for us and if it really benefits us. What did and what does the community engagement process look like? Chase, you mentioned that this is something that the neighborhood has been saying that they wanted. How you know, Chase?
So I'll shout out to Lauren Hood. Lauren Hood led the CDC in the neighborhood. And there were lots of community meetings. There were lots of community meetings. You can't really see it in the photo, but right next door to this space is a coffee shop called Detroit Sip. Lots of meetings at Detroit Sip. There's University of Detroit Mercy is very close. So lots of anchor institutions in the neighborhood where she was hosting real conversations where people were talking about what they wanted to see, but also what they were worried about, what they were angry about, all the things that we really should be asking the community. And honestly, she came up with the idea. She said, hey, this is the kind of anchor from these conversations that we've had that we need in this community. So she came up with this idea for the space. She and I collaborated for a time to figure out what this could look like. And, it came together. We decided that we would have, Black developers, Black contractors, Black architects, everybody Black. So reflecting the neighborhood, which is a predominantly African-American neighborhood. So we wanted to make sure that folks could see, you told us what you wanted. We came together as Black people to say that we could create it. This cool sort of metallic frame that you see on the building, it was a Black architect who came up with this design. There's African symbols on the metallic structure, throwback to West Africa. Like there are just lots of interesting community details that are included in the project. So that's how we knew. We asked.
Yeah, I want to get to Tanya, because Tanya, every time I talk to you, you always emphasize the relationship building piece of what you do and the building the human piece of what you do. What does that look like for this project?
So in the process, we had one set of ideas, and of course, when you talk to the community, there's always another set of ideas. And so it's been a journey, and it continues to evolve. I'm not saying that we're kind of at the place where the design is done. It's a constant evolvement of engaging. The intent before COVID was to do some more workshops, get more boots on the ground, do more interaction. And the idea was we did a series of events where we engaged, right? So we did door to door, we had youth engaged, we did some workshops around gentrification, we did some workshops of zoning because we had to go through that process. So as we learned and we went along, we tried to create opportunities and access for residents to learn just as much about the process as we were going along. And I think the other part is that we were flexible. So, some of the ideas that we had with co-working spaces scaled back with, an incubating where we could still continue to build capacity for other minority contractors, and then have less traffic around the neighborhood. But in the end, in the face of COVID, we did all this engagement. We collected a lot of local narratives and feedback, and through the design build workshops that we did within the community, we collected sketches and like all these awesome things that came about really beautifully. And what we ended up deciding to do because of COVID and not being able to continue that work, we're going to do a permanent exhibit within the house. And the whole thing that we're doing and that's going to be exhibited within the house is the inclusive social design process that we're using to move this project forward, slowly but surely. And so that exhibit is going to highlight that process, but it's also going to tell the narrative and the story about how important it is to preserve neighborhood culture and history in the face of rapid development. And, we want to use the place as a platform to uplift stakeholders' voice within the design built environment. We're not just advocating for skilled trades anymore. We're advocating for minorities in Detroit, local stakeholders to be involved in the whole design build process, because there's many facets in it that we don't talk about it enough, other than having a shortage of laborers for skilled trades. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. James, you're in Brooklyn, and your situation is a little different because you also had to engage not only residents, but businesses that were also residents. Talk about how those conversations are going and how they went initially. 7 years in.
Yeah, it's a long time. One thing that's interesting, during COVID, we've had some milestones over the last year and a half, some good, some bad. Our vendor markets, 36 vendors, most of them have been around for 20 plus years. Our elders, what I call them, they've been around for a very long time. A lot of them old enough to be my grandmother. So when you try to have a conversation with them, it's a different sort of dynamic, because I could talk about the business tropes around, having a P&L, putting your taxes in on time, all things that we sort of take for granted as sort of traditional business practice, but sometimes they're not trying to hear that. And there could be perfectly justifiable reasons why not. So relationship starts at the one-to-one level, from a business owner to a business owner, to say, look, we're building sort of a long tail here for you to get into a space that's going to be really beautiful, but you got to recognize, it's been 20 years since you first landed here. A lot that has changed. And so the old dog, new tricks thing, like, we have to walk together to get to a new place. So that's 36 individual conversations you're having. Then you're having collective conversation with the entire, group, and they have their own interpersonal dynamics that you're trying to work through as well. So you're trying to respect that on one level, but at the same time, find some common ground, because you have to move forward. And then it's all interlayered within a political context. It's a 21-month public process around entitlement. So from the time you get awarded the property, this case was a city property, you're talking to city planning, you're talking to city council, you're talking to the borough president, and you're talking to the community boards. And each of those constructs is a different sort of hurdle, where you're doing tons of community engagement with each group. And between that, and it's the nature of why you're going in front of them in the first place, which is to get changes to the building, in our case, to be able to put more affordable housing on top. It becomes a really, really interesting web. And so, when you deal with business owners in that context, it's not just about their businesses, it's really about what part of the tapestry of community they're part of, and making sure that when you're building this new thing, you don't lose that sort of history, but at the same time, you hope the history can kind of live and history can evolve, and you're building heritage. You're not just sort of like looking at it in a frozen kind of space. So it's been complicated. I'd say that it's been complicated.
I can imagine how complicated it is, and we've sort of, skirted around this, but I'm going to ask it just, emphatically as, developers and builders. We know and understand that, land planning, land possession is a part of a colonial structure, right? How do you develop under a capitalistic structure without projecting the embedded racism that's within that structure onto Black and Latinx people or other folks of color? How within that structure do you practice ethical development? Somebody on Facebook said, oh, you got Black architects and you got Black builders all to plug into a white system. Like how do you practice ethical development? Chase, I'll start with you.
So it's an interesting question, because I think of ethical development practices along a spectrum, right? Like it's nothing in the built environment is done but for people, right? So who gets the benefit of ownership? Who gets the benefit of the use of the property? Who gets the benefit of employment? Who gets the benefit of being in the space? Like all of these things people use to say that a development is ethical. So for us, along that spectrum, there's ownership, there's contractors, there's tenants. But on the ownership side, for example, it's two people who own it. They might be Black, but there's just two people. It's not a cooperative, it's not a collective ownership structure. So I think that we really do have to ask ourselves in that bundle, how many things can we get to ensure that the community benefits? And sometimes that very system puts barriers in the way to collective ownership. I had a conversation with a leader of a CDC on the east side of Detroit today about, cooperatives in terms of buying commercial buildings on the east side of Detroit. And we talked about securities laws and how securities laws in the state of Michigan makes it really difficult to get a lot of people to be able to buy into a single project or to a number of projects in a neighborhood. So there are things in the system that are built in to make sure that equitable outcomes don't happen. So part of it is being able to raise up those issues and advocate for policies that allow Black people to actually create the structures that they want to improve their communities. Because many times we try to be creative, we try to push against the system to get positive outcomes, only to find that the system isn't built to actually allow us to do the things that we want to do. So we are trying to reduce the harms in a system that's designed to hurt community.
James, I see you shaking your head. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll jump in because he totally is touching on something that we're dealing with on our side. I mean, we're a little further along. So we had to go through several iterations of getting knocked down with our really novel ideas around community ownership. So, the structure of the financing in 2016 changed fundamentally when Trump came into office. We had a grand plan to use new market tax credits, condo out the ground floor, and essentially, through a 7-year tax credit process, allow for the business owners to buy the condo from us. In one foul swoop, this guy comes in, he cuts corporate tax credits. The tax credit product that we were intending to use drops by a third. So we go from having a perfectly structured deal to $6 million in the hole overnight. So to keep the train moving, because at this point, there's tons of pre-development funds that have already been spent on this. We had to restructure the deal to make it more conventional financing. So now it's one whole building. So now you're talking about collateral for the entire building versus in two separate spaces. The city was part of the deal. They did not want to hear one, and I can say this now because the building's already up, but I'll just put it out on the street. So the city had no desire, and I say the city of New York, no desire to talk about a structure where community could buy equity in on the front end, or even, this is what really pissed me off, on the back end.
Wow.
So I said, look, let's talk about the delta between, I put pharmacy, dollar store, something crappy on the ground floor, and I put this 20-year community anchor. And at that point, it'd be 25 years by the time we're talking about a potential exit for investors. If I could measure the delta between the crappy sort of traditional retail and what goes in there, that delta for me was going to be the community equity that was earned, through the nature of the project. But collateral requirements came in. To Chase's point, the structure of our financing system did not allow for that kind of structure to come into place. So we played around with, where can we create ownership opportunity from a collective perspective in the business asset. So now we're focused a lot more on the business asset of the marketplace and what we can do there, and that we control. So we have a lot more flexibility in that respect. But we lost an opportunity because of the way the tax credits were structured. So the one other point I want to make around Chase's point around security as well. So the good news is I learned the hard way that like if I want to do community build, I need to have my hands on my own money. So we're part of a 12 city cohort that's building, it's in the process of right now building, you know, a place-based fund. So we have one in Philly, one in Brooklyn, and there's folks across the country doing the same thing based on a Boston model called the Boston Impact Initiative. They have, you know, a charitable loan fund model where they're able to basically bring in sort of debt or grant and kick out equity for all kinds of interesting sort of racial wealth gap ameliorating investments. And so we're focused on real estate in our market. So we're spending about 18 months to stand up a fund, particularly to deal with the loophole that Chase was talking about, the 1933 and 1940 Security Act that does not allow for non-accredited investors to invest in, you know, assets that are deemed risky.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. It locks out so many people.
So many people. So the loopholes we're going through right now to create the legal constructs to do this, again, we're spending lots of time and treasure to make it happen, but it's worth it, right? So the next one of these we do, knock on wood, there's always different issues coming up, but there'll be an opportunity to do what we're talking about here around having community ownership in place.
Tanya, before I move on, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think for us, just as a builder, not a developer, but just being intentional about who we use on the projects. I think for us, it's one project at a time. So because we approach the brick and mortar through the lens of urban planning and placemaking, for us, you know, I feel like we make a difference with our clients and the clients that we work with, because we work with the churches, we work with the schools, we work with the nonprofits. So it's not just about AGI or the brick and mortar and the place, but it's how does those activities and those places impact the people. We have kids now that are eating, you know, school lunches out of a cafeteria. We have built, you know, learning labs. There is, you know, closing the digital divide. So for us, it's one project at a time by choosing to work with the clients that we work with, prioritizing those projects that have a greater impact on the neighborhoods and a return for them in the long view.
Can we talk a little bit about capital? We talked about, you know, alternative models of ownership. And Chase, you do work to help Detroiters become developers in their own neighborhoods. Where does this capital come from? Do we got money like that? Because you got you own a space. Chase got money, y'all. Chase doing something right. Where you get the money from, Chase? Where are we getting this capital in the Black and Latinx community?
I signed my life away when I signed those loan papers. So, but what's interesting about that question, in Detroit, you know, real estate can still be reasonable in some places, right, in the city. And we put out a survey last year, the summer of last year, 121 developers of all sizes responded, and the majority are using their own money. All of them said that they need more capital. They would like to take on debt. They would like to be able to go to a bank and actually get a loan, but they're not able to. A lot of the requirements, you know, aren't conducive to small scale development. If you're doing a single family home or a duplex and your plan is to either sell it or rent it out to someone, if you're not living there as your principal residence, it's hard to get those loans. So, you know, in this market in Detroit, there are some lenders who are creating what they're calling more flexible, you know, loan products. But still, even with the loan product, you need to have your own equity. You need to have some skin in the game. So James and I will need to talk because, you know, here in Detroit, we've been talking about creating equity funds, but it's a struggle. It's a real struggle.
Yeah. It's like, you know, if you don't got no money, you got this desire, it's, you know, that's just a huge, you know, it's a huge barrier that I see, or the right credit history, right? I think that in so many instances, you know, we can't outright deny financial products for Black people, but I think credit has been used as a proxy for race in recent years.
Well, what's interesting about that point, I mean, I learned this the hard way, and there's data around this. If your lender, if your loan officer is comfortable with you as an individual, the credit score really doesn't matter. right? They will look at a bad credit score and say, you know, we get that, but the project is good, and we know the project's going to cash flow, so we don't really care about your credit score. So it's the relationship, it's getting in the door, and oftentimes these loan officers are not in the city of Detroit, right? They don't know the market, they don't know Black people, Black developers, right? So the trust isn't there. So they will use a credit score as a proxy for race. So part of this is also change in the industry. Do we have loan officers who are Black, who understand Detroit as a market or whatever city that you're in, who understand that there are Black developers doing the same work or better work than white developers? Like, there's a whole system shift that has to happen within that industry as well. Because I'll just be honest on here, right? Like, I went in with a credit score that wasn't great. And I really had that conversation with my lender about this bad credit score, and they were like, yeah, we know. It's okay.
Wow.
And it was a relationship. It was a relationship that was built, and we literally had the conversation. The loan officer was Black. We had this conversation about what credit scores mean. And you know, depending on the lender that you're with, there is that data out there about who is getting the loans, and it's clear that Black folk aren't getting the loans at the same rates as white folk. There are reasons.
James, does relationship work? I mean, I heard a story about you and one of your lenders on last Friday. Talk a little bit about that. And you built a relationship, right?
Yeah. So, you know, we have the large bank that were named nameless. We've been
say it. We have a candid. No, I'm messing with you.
So I mean, look, it's Wells Fargo. I hate them. No, so you know, at this point, it was interesting. Right now, I was up until 4 o'clock in the morning last night, and I was literally emailing CRA, so Community Reinvestment Act loan officers. And the nice thing about New York, obviously, it's a hub for a lot of that capital. So we're lucky in the respect that we have lots of money sort of floating around out there, and it's looking for deals. And so we build a relationship to some extent, I think, based on, like, you know, what kind of category you fit in. The problem is the deals that Urbane does are always weird and funky. And so there's already going to be, to that point, a level of disconnect around vetting and doing due diligence, because they don't understand, you know, all the dynamics of it. So then you move to these proxies that you're speaking to. And for Wells, you know, I'm like, you can literally see my analytics in your bank account because you know how much money I have, you know how I pay my credit cards, you know how I do X, Y, and Z. And to your point, I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years. So yeah, my credit ain't great, because there's been times where, you know, I started my company in the financial crisis. I'm like, it is what it is. I've got to make payroll. I'm going to pay a credit card off. I'm going to make my payroll. So I'll take the hit. And so to Chase's point, I think you can have those conversations with folks. I think the issue becomes, you know, it's frankly not just debt we're dealing with. It's also equity, to his point. At some point, even if you get a really good, highly levered deal, you still got to put 10% up. And, you know, to the point of, you know, things in New York or even Philly, it's a little more expensive. So where's that money going to come from? But for damn sure, it ain't going to be Wells Fargo. So I think one of the things that's really interesting about the banking industry in general, there's a really important thing to think about around credit regime. Like, there's all kinds of credit you can talk about. You have an individual personal credit, but you also have business credit that you establish over time as well. But again, these same sort of barriers exist. They want to use it when they want to use it, but then they always want personal guarantees, and they always look at your credit on the personal side as well. So it gets blended in. But there's literally legal structures to be able to separate these two things out. So you can separate liability, you can separate out, you know, the bank accounts, et cetera. But when push comes to shove, to your exact point, it's a human relationship and a human decision. There's algorithms involved in all this stuff, but the bottom line is somebody at the top says, you know what, I like this deal, I like you, I like this, you know, opportunity point. I'll skirt all these things and make a decision point. And I think making the relationships with folks who are able to do that is a good look at all things. The moment we're in is really fascinating, because I've had more calls accepted in the last 6 weeks, I'll say, give or take, than I've had probably in the last six years, because of the moment we're in right now. It's a fascinating time. So yeah, I mean, like, you know, it's not COVID, and it's, you know, the uprising has been an interesting opportunity to sort of like lean into crisis and have a new narrative around capital. We'll see where it goes, because it's a very new thing, but we'll see where it goes.
So the moment is also a movement, right? And is palpable in cities all across America. And I know that all different kinds of sectors are looking for ways to, you know, practice true equity, if that, you know, I'll say that in air quotes, in diversity. Tanya, talk about this moment that we're in, you know, movement, moments, pandemics, reckonings, like how is it shaping the work you're doing right now?
Yeah. It definitely is a revolutionary time. I don't think that I ever recall so many people coming together to move and protect humanity and come together as one humanity, which is powerful. We have this saying before that we always say partnerships is the new leadership, and we've been saying that for a long time because we've just ran into personally so many barriers and things to try to remove and move forward. But I would say that now is the time to challenge all of our positions in terms of the power and the platforms that we have. And whatever role or capacity that is, whether that's, you know, an entrepreneur being able to give jobs, whether that's a developer being able to include community members in the process, whether that's foundations looking for innovative ways to get the money out into the neighborhoods and the people that really need it. I think it's also a critical time for us to come together to look at strategies, and the old strategies are not working anymore. I hear a lot of frustration with some of my peers and people in different sectors that are just tired of kind of the same conversations, that those old strategies don't work anymore. But I think the key is that the partnerships and the relationships, and for all of us to challenge ourselves to use our platforms and our power in ways to change the system and be able to come together, right, and shift that narrative and put those narratives in the front to continue to put those narratives out. So
yeah, Chase, you have anything to add to that?
The only thing that's been coming up for me about this moment, and you know, we keep talking about developers and development. In community, a lot of times, I want more community members to see themselves as developers, right? As potential developers. There are folks out there who are you know, in their eyes, they're just rehabbing houses, right? I'm like, no, you have been doing this for a long time. You have a practice. You're making money off of it. Like I think in this time, I want folks to be able to understand the agency that they already have. And a lot of times when we're talking to community members, they're thinking of developers as folks who don't look like them, folks who are coming from the outside. But I want to reframe it to allow folks to know that developers are in your neighborhood. Like there are folks who are doing development work in your neighborhood right now. And I think that's the shift in this, you know, as Tanya said, this revolutionary time, like seeing the agency that we already have. And I love working with folks who go through the course and begin to understand some of the finer things that, you know, we've all been talking about. How do you build the capital stack? How do you talk to lenders? How do you do all these things? But the vision that someone who's lived in a community for 20, 30, 40 years that they have about how their block should be, like that's the starting point for being a developer. And I want people to be able to use that starting point to know that they can actually transform their communities. And that's sort of the revolutionary moment that we're in.
And it's actually revolutionary to say, right? For these folks that have been in neighborhoods, rehabbing homes and taking care of them, it's revolutionary to say, I am a Black or Latinx developer or a developer of color, because I think from the outside looking in, when we look at the build sector and we look at the development sector, we don't always associate that with us, right? But we are in the sector.
Not only are we in the sector, but we're innovating too. And you know, I would push back a little bit about saying that, you know, we're Black developers or we're Latinx developers or we're women developers or we're whatever that adjective is. Like we're developers, right? We're developing space. We're reshaping our communities. Like we don't need the qualifiers.
That's interesting.
And I have to say, like we're in this moment in Detroit right now. Yeah, that this proposal that may be on our ballot, the blight bond that is coming back, where the mayor's asking for $250 million. Part of that is rehabbing 8,000 houses in the city of Detroit, 8,000 houses. And to reframe it for Black Detroiters, Black and Latinx Detroiters, that they are developers, like opens up an opportunity to really transform the city in a way that it's even hard to imagine. But we need that sort of radical imagination to say this opportunity may come and we need to be ready for it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I want to give you all an opportunity for last words. This conversation, oh man, the time went by so quickly. An opportunity for last words and for you to tell us how we can support what you are building. I'll start with the lady of the hour, Tanya.
I think I kind of said it when the last conversation is that, again, it's about partnerships. And so for us, it's looking for other minority contractors, for builders, for architects, for skilled trades, for funders, right? Other business owners, stakeholders, for community residents to come to the table and use their voice to say what it is that they want to see, so that we can allow our opportunities to spread to everybody else. So for us, that's key with moving forward, is that we want to move forward, and we want to move forward by leaving nobody behind. So.
Oh, I love it. James.
Yeah, I'm gonna say three things. One, your dollar matters. Where you put your dollar is super important. And so you're talking about developments that are going to have, contractors, small businesses in them. Even on the housing side, where you spend your dollar really is important, especially in this moment, to support small and local business, independent businesses that are going to need a long tail for support. So I'm like, put your money where your mouth is. We're talking about all these types of revolutionary focus on capital. The most revolutionary thing you can do is make a decision around how you spend your money from a consumer perspective, and back up your sort of theories with practice. So that's number one for sure. Number two, look up Leon Sullivan. Reverend Leon Sullivan was one of the pioneers. Everything we're talking about happened 30 years ago, 60 years ago, 90 years ago in some form or fashion in our communities. Dr. Leon Sullivan was the head of Zion Baptist Church of Philadelphia. He came up with the 1036 plan. He had 400 parishioners, saved $10 for 36 months, and they took that money and they bought a shopping center. It's called Progress Plaza. One of the first gigs I ever did in a previous life was help get that refinanced. So in 1998, about 250 little old black ladies owned a shopping center free and clear, but they had no money to do the rehab, no money to do the maintenance on that thing. And that was the goal, to preserve that ownership and keep that in community in North Philly. That happened a ton in the 60s. I'm pretty sure in Rosa Parks Boulevard here in Detroit, there was a locally owned shopping center that came in the same kind of context point. We have it in our blood, the ability to be able to collectively move to action. We forgot what the game was. We got, at this point, COVID, we just got to bring it back. So remember that moment. And then third, look, to Chase's point, this is not about labels at this point. It's about action. So if there's opportunity for you to be able to learn more, do more, and put your foot in the ground and figure out how to make a real stand around what you're thinking about, the platitudes are over. It's like, it's time to move.
Yeah, time for action. Mr. Cantrell, Urban Consulate Host Emeritus, you get the last word.
So first, applications are open for BCV, right? So if there are folks who are listening who are like, hey, I want to learn how to do development, there's a house on my block that I want to buy and do something with, or a small commercial space, bcvdetroit.org, applications are open until August 15th. So that's one. For those who want to support that kind of effort, there's a donate button too. It's a nonprofit, so tax deductible. And three, there's so much money flowing into some neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. And I just need people to continue showing up, because I know that people are showing up to council meetings, to anything that the mayor holds. Like there are narratives, there's a vision for the city that our elected officials have developed amongst themselves that trickles down into everything. It trickles down into philanthropy. It trickles down into the way the lenders lend. And we need to continue to push
and
back.
Employment. I want to say that it trickles down to Detroiters being employed.
Everything. Like it really does matter how this city is being reshaped. And I was really heartened to see at the end of 2019, so many people show up to push back against that vision. So in 2020, You know, it may be more difficult in the era of COVID, but in the ways that you can show up and use your voice and demand what you want to see in your communities, show up. Show up to the Zoom, show up to the call, social distance at a protest, but show up.
Show up. What a powerful statement, and what a powerful call to action. I want to thank James Johnson Pyatt from Urban Development, Tanya Ali from the 18th Street Build Hub, and Chase Cantrell from Building Community Value. I so appreciate you all taking the time to talk to us within this We Built This series, and y'all are actually building. So hats off to y'all for being amazing humans. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Orlando.
I want to thank the New Economy Initiative for funding this series, this 3-night series. We are having an amazing time and learning so much. I want to thank Urban Consulate, our tech guru, JP, and our founder, Claire Nelson. Shout out to Bridge Detroit, our media partner, where you will be able to revisit all of this content again. And I want to thank our host site. Yes, we are broadcasting live from the Cochran House Luxury Inn. It's a bed and breakfast owned by 2 sisters, Black women who happen to also be sisters. Visit thecochranhouse.com. Y'all see my mug. Visit thecochranhouse.com so that you can check out the photo gallery and see the rates. They are reopening in August. Listen, we will be back tomorrow night, and it's a night that you don't want to miss. We will be talking to IOB in the form of Aaron Barnes and Jennifer Allen about how communities can support projects that are in our own backyards. And then we're talking to some heavy hitters, some huge philanthropic players here in the city of Detroit. We'll be talking to Kevin Ryan from the Ford Foundation, and Pam Lewis from New Economy Initiative, and Nathaniel Wallace from the Knight Foundation to talk about investing in our people. And we are going to have a really candid conversation about what that looks like in the city of Detroit. And afterwards, to close out this amazing 3-night series, we got Drake Pfeiffer coming in on the 1s and 2s for the after party. Yes, the after party that's going to be broadcasting live on Facebook and Zoom. I want you to join me. Detroiters know, in the world, in the nation, knows who Drake Pfeiffer is. Listen, it's going to be fire. So make sure you tune in tomorrow. We're talking about investing in our people and supporting our own projects. We even got Nathaniel Wallace. I want to emphasize that Nathaniel Wallace at Knight Foundation does not do panels. He made this exception. So you want to tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m. and we will once again be broadcasting live from the Cochran House. Until then, everybody, I will see you same time, same place tomorrow from a different section of the Cochran House. Have a great evening.
One, two, three, four.